You are standing in the middle of your kitchen and you have just said your own name out loud, or maybe it wasn't your name, maybe it was a single word. Keys. Okay, come on, nobody was there to hear it, and if someone had been, you might have felt a small flicker of embarrassment, because talking to yourself is supposed to be the thing people do when something has gone slightly wrong upstairs. You have probably apologized for it before, but the real answer is far stranger than a nervous habit. That muttering under your breath is not a glitch in an otherwise quiet mind. It is one of the oldest and most powerful tools your species ever built, and you started using it before you could tie your shoes. Think back, if you can, to being very small, or just watch any 3-year-old at play and you will hear it almost constantly. Put the block here. No, not there. Big one on top. They are not talking to you. They are narrating their own hands. A psychologist named Lev Vygotsky noticed this nearly a century ago, and what he made of it quietly reshaped how scientists understand the human mind. He called it private speech. Children, he argued, do not first learn to think silently and then begin to speak. It runs the other way around. First, the words are out loud spoken to the open air. Then, somewhere around the start of school, the words begin to go quiet. The lips stop moving. The voice drops to a whisper, and then below a whisper, and then it vanishes from the room entirely. But it does not vanish from you. It just goes underground. And that underground voice is what you now call thinking. Sit with that for a second. The inner monologue running right now, the one reading these very words, the one that sounds unmistakably like you. Vygotsky's work suggests it began as something you once said out loud to no one in particular and only slowly learned to speak on the inside. Thought, by this account, is conversation that got quiet. So when you catch yourself muttering in the kitchen, you are not malfunctioning at all. You are briefly turning the volume back up on a channel that has been playing under everything you do since you were a toddler. So why would the volume ever need to come back up? Why speak out loud when you can already think in silence? Because the spoken word does something the silent one cannot. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a cognitive scientist named Gary Lupyan ran an experiment that sounds almost too simple to matter. Together with a colleague, Daniel Swingley, he asked people to find ordinary objects hidden in a cluttered field of images. A chair, a loaf of bread. Sometimes the searchers hunted in complete silence. Sometimes they were asked to say the name of the thing out loud as they looked for it. Chair, chair, chair. The ones who spoke found it faster, not because they imagined it would help, not because they expected it to. Saying the word actually tuned their eyes. Hearing chair in your own voice, Lupyan's results suggest, briefly turns your visual system into a better chair detector. The spoken label reaches back down into perception itself and sharpens the very thing you are trying to see, lifting it out of the visual noise around it. That desperate mutter of keys, keys, keys as you pat your pockets is not a sign of helplessness. It is you loading a target into your own vision on purpose without ever realizing that is what you're doing. You never noticed you were doing something that clever, and once you start looking for it, you see it everywhere. The surgeon murmuring the next step before making the cut, the athlete repeating a single word to himself in the seconds before the whistle, the cook reciting the recipe under her breath so the order of things won't slip. None of these people are anxious or scattered. They are the most focused people in the room. They have simply learned, often without being told, that saying a thing out loud gives the mind something firmer to hold on to than a silent thought ever could. The words become handrails. But here is where the same tool turns dangerous, because the voice that helps you find your keys can also turn around and take you apart. You know this second voice too? It is the one that replays the awkward thing you said at dinner 6 years ago. The one that narrates in vivid detail the worst possible version of tomorrow morning. The one that at 2 in the morning is somehow still awake and still talking and will not let you sleep. Ethan Kross, who directs the Emotion and Self-Control Laboratory at the University of Michigan, has spent decades studying this darker channel. He gave it a name. He calls it chatter, the looping, corrosive kind of self-talk that never actually solves the problem but keeps circling back to poke at it. And inside all that noise, he found something small and surprising that changes everything. When you are spiraling, you almost always talk to yourself in the first person. Why can't I do this? What is wrong with me? I always ruin everything. That little word, I, locks you inside the storm with no way to see out of it. But Kross discovered that if you change one tiny thing, the storm begins to lose its grip. You change the pronoun. Instead of "why can't I do this," you say, using your own name, "Okay, why is this hard for you right now? What do you do next?" It feels faintly ridiculous the first time. It works anyway. Kross calls this distanced self-talk, and experiment after experiment in his lab points to the same result. Referring to yourself by name, or simply as you instead of I, quietly pulls you back from the edge of your own emotions. It is the difference between drowning in the flood and watching that same flood from the safety of a bridge. And this matters more than it might seem, because chatter does not stay in your head. It leaks out into the body. The looping thoughts raise your heart rate, sour your sleep, and pull your attention off the very task you're trying to do, so that a single bad conversation with yourself can quietly wreck an entire day. That is why the fix is not a luxury. Learning to change the voice is, in a real sense, learning to protect your own health. Why would a single swapped word do so much? Because of who names are for. You almost never use your own name in your head. You use names for other people. So the instant you say your own name, some deep social circuit in your mind treats the moment as if you were giving advice to someone else entirely. And you are nearly always far kinder and far wiser to a struggling friend than you are to yourself. Distanced self-talk is really just a trick for borrowing your own compassion and finally aiming it inward. And that points toward the strangest truth in all of this. The voice inside your head was never really yours alone. Go back to Vygotsky's narrating children for one more moment. Where did their private speech actually come from? It came from the grown-ups standing over them. Careful, not so fast. Good job, almost. The child hears these words from the outside first. Then he begins repeating them to himself out loud on the outside. And finally, he folds them inward, where they harden into the quiet voice that guides him for the rest of his life. The voice you think of as the most private, most secret, most genuinely you is stitched together out of every voice that ever spoke to you. Charles Fernyhough, a researcher at Durham University who studies inner speech, describes that inner voice as fundamentally dialogic. That word simply means it is not a single flat monologue. It is a conversation. It carries different tones, different positions, sometimes what feel like different characters. When you argue with yourself, when part of you says do it and another part says don't, you are not short-circuiting. You are running a small committee inside your own skull, and every member of that committee first learned to speak from a real person in your past. So the next time the voice is cruel to you, listen very closely. Whose voice is that, really? Where did it first learn those exact words? And when the voice is kind and steady, remember that it too was handed to you by someone once. Now think about what all of this means for an ordinary Tuesday. Every single time you talk yourself through something hard, telling yourself to slow down and take it one step at a time, you are using the exact tool Vygotsky watched toddlers invent from scratch. Every time you name the thing you are hunting for, you are sharpening your own perception in precisely the way Lupyan measured in his lab. And every time you catch the late-night spiral and say out loud or under your breath, "Come on, you've got this," you are doing the very thing that pulled Kross's participants up and out of their own heads. You were never talking to yourself because something in you was broken. You were talking to yourself because at some ancient point in growing up, a small human being figures out that the mind simply runs better out loud and then learns to run it silently and then forgets it ever learned the trick at all. So what would change if you started doing it on purpose again? Because most of your self-talk is automatic. And automatic means unsupervised. The voice runs whatever script it happened to pick up, kind or cruel, generous or brutal, and it does not stop to ask your permission first. But it can be steered. You can choose the words you feed into your own vision when you are searching for something you've lost. You can choose the pronoun you reach for when the night gets long and the chatter starts. You can quite literally out-talk yourself into being a little braver, a little clearer, and a great deal more forgiving. The tool has been installed since before you could read. You have carried it your entire life. The only thing you have never quite done is pick it up on purpose. So the next time you are standing in the middle of your kitchen and you hear your own name leave your mouth with no one there to answer it, do not apologize. You are not losing your mind. You are using it at last exactly the way it was built to be used.